We're back. Another episode, Better Learning Podcast. I have a repeat guest today, and I'm excited to reconnect with Mike Cobb because I think, Mike, you were in, our first season. I don't know if you remember, back like 2017-ish, 2018 maybe.
Yes.
And we're sitting I'm in a studio recording. We're doing a lot better, but when we did it, we recorded, it was like super loud, I think at like maybe NAIS, one of the conferences, and I didn't really know what I was doing technology-wise and just starting to learn it. But I'm excited to have you back because give a little bit of your background before we start talking about NEOM and your experience in here. But do you mind just setting a little bit of like kind of how you got into education? Because I always view you as like one of those big change makers in education. He just always has like a fresh eye to it.
I appreciate that. Well, yeah, it's great to be here, and it is fun. I was reminiscing on meeting you for the first time and us doing the podcast at NEIS and basically a lobby there and just having a great conversation, but also thinking, wow, these people are all around us here, not even knowing that we're doing these deep thoughts right now. It's really fun. But yeah, so I really have come to education. I've been blessed that for 35 years, I've been really working at trying to be someone who's trying to look forward and around corners for how we learn and what that looks like. And I've really worked for basically 3 schools in that time. I worked for 20 years at the Oak Ridge School, where I was able to really have this unique opportunity to do so many things at that school that was growing and really kind of finding its way. And so I was a teacher, coach, I was head of marketing for a while, did summer programs, head of middle school for 10 years, ended up being over enrollment and admissions. And just, again, a place where I could really find myself as a leader, but also feel valued as someone, adding to the overall mission of the school. Then I moved on to All Saints in Tyler, Texas, where I was the head of school for almost 7 years. And given the unique opportunity and challenge by the board to do something different and to try to turn around a school that was honestly a pretty sleepy little Episcopal school in a small Texas town into a mover and shaker. And we did that through really reimagining how we could think about authentic learning, student agency, and agile frameworks, and really embed that in every part of the school. In addition, we did 31 major construction projects in that short amount of time, including building cool things like the Science Explorium, which was a monolithic dome that was an experiential science lab. We built the learning villages, which were what our classrooms used to be, and we turned them into a village where each class was now a home. We had the Center for Innovation, lots of cool spaces, outdoor learning, the Learning Farm. And so that's really my passion. And then from that, I decided to take probably the biggest leap of my life, and I joined the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia, where they are truly trying to reimagine what life will look like, not even 10, 15, or 50 years from now, but hundreds of years in the future, and how we can prepare for that future with the giga projects of the Line, Oxagon, Sandala. And so I was part of the project that was looking at how we do 2 things. One, how do we support what's going on right now in Saudi Arabia? When I left just about a month ago, we had over 6,000 people living in our NEOM Community 1, and we have almost 1,000 students that we were supporting over 3 campuses that we built in less than 18 months. Jeez. So we were iterating fast, and it's even going to iterate faster down the road. So we were doing that, taking care of those folks, but we were then planning for what is part of the 2030 and then now to 2050 vision to have 4,000 what we'd call learning centers, so schools. So it's a massive project. So it was an incredible experience for me, both personally and professionally. And then I'm very blessed now that I've just joined the mission and data team, working as the senior innovation and organizational excellence strategist. So helping schools really think into the future and think about what their strategy is and how they build the best value proposition for their community. And then I'm also working with Forsyth Country Day School here in Winston-Salem as the Futurist in residence. So doing that for a community locally is bringing me lots of joy.
First off, you win for the coolest title. I mean, what?
Thank you.
Yeah, like Yeah, I hope I can get that title at some point. That sounds like that'd be amazing. So I really want to dig in because I've watched kind of some of the research of what Saudi Arabia was trying to do, and then I heard you were going over there. And I'm like, wow, like one, they picked probably the perfect person to have that perspective, but. Did you go over there thinking I'm going to do? Was it 2 or 3 years that you spent?
Yeah, 2 years. Yes.
2 years. Did you go into it thinking this is a 2-year stint and I'm going to?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it for us, and it was hard to leave. It was hard to leave, Kevin. I mean, because it was an amazing experience for us. Again, my wife and I went over together, and so as part of our journey, we wanted to do something really big. We wanted to do something that was different, and we wanted to be part of something that we thought would impact the world. And so we went over with that mindset, though. And when we got ready to leave, it was way more difficult than we thought it would be because we had so many connections to the people that are doing great work there, but also just the change in lifestyle. It actually suited us quite well. But we also missed home a lot. It's very hard to be that far away. And we're not expats. We met lots of great friends that are expats. Just that's who they are, right? And they do this. We are not. We had always lived close to home, close to family. And so that 36-hour flight or all the flights were 36 hours to get home. It mounted. But we also say that we will be going back. That part of my plans is to continue to help those schools and those folks that are doing great things all across the Middle East. But also it's part of our heart now.
So for the people who have not kind of watched what they're doing, and it's called The Line, right? Like that was the big initiative.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And I've watched that video, like several years ago, and be like, holy cow, they're like, this feels like it's not even real. Like what they're doing in the middle of the desert, like just basically building like self-containing communities, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's incredible. And I can tell you it's real. I live there, and the line is fully under development, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The construction is going, and it is incredible to watch and see. Now, obviously, the line is a massive project that will take decades to complete. It's part of what is the 2030 vision for NEOM. So it's a long-term project. People keep asking all the time about, is the line done? No, and it wasn't ever supposed to be done yet. It's a massive endeavor to have a 100-mile linear city that doesn't have any transportation. The livability is built around a cognitive approach where everything is really helping you think through your life and make it the most efficient, but also that it's all walkable or that you can transport without having any vehicles. So it's an amazing enterprise, and again, fully sustainable, 100% zero carbon footprint for living, and it would be for almost 10 million people when it's done. So it's a massive giga project of all giga projects. But like Oxagon and Sandala, which are two very different projects that are part of the NEOM, they are well underway. Oxagon is open and working as a port, and I mean still at a small percentage of what it will become, but it is already functioning. And then of course Sandala, the island city, should be open, if not in a matter of weeks, at least within a month or so here. And so these projects are real. Trojena, our mountain city, that's another giga project where the 2030 Asian Olympic Games will be held, is underway too. So I live there. Like I say, when I first came to NEOM, I think we had about 1,500 people that were living in the NEOM Community 1. When I left, there were 6,000. And that what's going on there is that they're attracting the best talent in the world, people who want to take what they've been doing somewhere else and get to do something that is elevated, something that is off the table for most places. But right now for Saudi Arabia, they want to dream bigger than anybody, and they're doing that.
So when you started talking to them and they're kind of painting the vision and trying to, attract the best of the best in the world, they're like, what was the charge that they gave you when you're going there? Like, hey, we want you to come here and do what?
Yeah. So they basically recruited me because they felt like there was nowhere in the world that was really imagining education the way that it could fit within the line, within Trojena, within Oxagon, these futuristic cities that they are wanting to imagine, that they are building now. And so they basically said, we want you to come and help us imagine what that would look like, but also then to actually build the accountability around how do we make that happen. That was my dream. I was very blessed to work in independent schools in the United States that were forward thinking, but still, I was always finding myself pushing against the resistance to change, the resistance to we have it figured out, or my big nemesis is it's good enough was always the thing. And that was not the language that NEOM was talking. Good enough was not ever going to be good enough. And so they wanted, as they say often, they wanted dreamers and doers. And that's what I always kind of tagged myself. Like I literally used that line many times before I heard it from NEOM. So it resonated with me. And it's really crazy for someone like myself who's never lived abroad. And though I love to travel, I never thought about living anywhere else, certainly not in Saudi Arabia. But when this opportunity came, I was like, this is it. And I went to my wife, who I thought would be reticent, and she was just so excited about this opportunity to take adventure. And so we did it, and we have zero regrets. The only regret is that we weren't able to make it last longer. If they had a portal where we could get back to our family, I think we'd still be there right now.
They're working on that, right?
Yes, they are.
Wow. So, and I mean, family-wise, it sounded like, your youngest was just moving on to college or about that timing.
So she was just finishing college, starting her career. So it's a perfect time for us. Yeah.
What a cool experience.
Yeah, it was great. And I was able to have my mom, who's in her late 70s, and my daughter come over to Saudi Arabia. I mean, those were joyous times for them to get to not only experience what we were living, but to really see a part of the world they would not have seen otherwise. It was amazing.
All right. So now you're over there. They convince you to move over there. And you get there. Where do you even start? What was like the first day of the first week like?
Yeah. Well, I will be very honest that for the first several months, it was just culture shock in the sense of trying to understand a city that was thinking so far ahead and trying to keep up with that. Every thought that I used to have that I think was so innovative, or that was sometimes thought to be too far-fetched, was not too far-fetched there at all. We're living at a NEOM community where we have facial recognition. Everything is automated. It's not quite a cognitive city yet, but it's all those things that will become part of the experience are already being embedded. So, it's just amazing. But also it was different for me. I'd never worked for a corporation. Working for small independent schools, there's a different cadence to how you work and just process-wise. And so I had to really quickly figure out too. I was working for, I believe, the largest corporation in the world with their funding. And there were different procedures. And just me being head of school or me being in charge of something, I didn't just get to do it or whatever. I still had a very detailed process that sometimes took as much time or energy as maybe one of the $1 billion, procurements were going to take. It took for me for the school. So I had to figure that out. But I do pride myself that I like to say that if you tell me the rules of the game, I can kind of get into it, and I will make that work for me at some point. So I figured out how I feel like to work through the corporate culture, and there are great benefits to working for a corporation that size, and there are some downsides as well. And you got to figure out how to leverage those.
Yeah. So give me some ideas, some stories, or some interactions that you had where like maybe where you were pushing it before, or where you'd be like, hey, I want to do this, and they're saying it's not far enough, or like what were they trying to accomplish? Like, what was the big view of saying, like, we are going to do this unlike anyone else on the planet is doing?
Well, I will say I can talk in high level about some of this. I can't go into granular level about a lot of this, obviously, because NEOM is very proud of what they're building, and what they want to do in the future is they hope that they're creating the standard for how every other city will be built, but also we're hoping we create the standard for how all schools will operate sometime in the future as well. So I can't talk about all the details, but I can tell you that the way they're thinking about, first of all, personalized education is very unique, that every student should have their own personalized pathways, and that they should be able to actually have an experience that is, almost unique to them. And that's something we talk about a lot. in my experience in American schools, but we really don't have it. We may talk about personalized education, but we're still putting kids in about 3 or 4 boxes, but not really letting them have their own trail. And what NEOM is looking at is how can they really create those personal pathways using some of the technologies and some of the things that they are putting embedded into the school to allow that to assist. But also, one thing that I will say that I learned is probably my biggest epiphany is that amongst all the technologies we were using in some really incredible ways, the relationships between the teachers and the students were still the number one indicator for success. And I think I knew that somewhat internally, but I was so excited about the new things we were offering that I think I was overplaying that hand a little bit. The classrooms that were having the best outcomes at our schools were still the classrooms that had the best teachers, right? It wasn't like the technology took that away and made it somehow leveled. It still was about the quality of relationship, the quality of the teacher in the room that made that happen. But to go a little more specifically, though, we were doing some really cool things using, again, facial recognition, but we were also using things where we were looking at biometric feedback to look at, engagement for students in class, looking at how we would be able to predict even if kids were going to be absent or not, because we could see if there might be biometric things that were telling us that they're likely to be absent the next week. When students were absent, we were able to keep them engaged in learning through some of our really unique ways, what we call NEOM X. So it's basically, if you will, remote learning. And then lastly, what we were doing with AI and robotics, I think is beyond what anyone else is doing in the world. I can't go into a ton of details, but we are using those technologies to really, leverage time, but also space with students. We used several robots, including the Misty robot, as personal tutors for students. So they could not only help students and encourage them and kind of have a tutoring effect, but also give feedback to the teacher about what kind of questions was the student asking, how much time did they spend on homework, how many types of questions did they answer or avoid, and give that feedback directly to teachers. But also even things like what were the students Googling or questioning, and if it was something about this kid loves cars, then you could direct your questions or your activities towards those interests. And then lastly, we also were doing a lot with the social robots, the Fur Hat. I don't know if you know about them. They're out of Denver, but they're doing some really amazing things with LED, basically lit robots that you can do small and large language models on. And so we were teaching our kids how to use those. And for all of our parent events, they would actually create a scenario where those robots would be greeting the parents at the door, and the parents could ask them about any question about the night, and they had programmed it. And then we had the Amera robot, which is the one that most people know that's been integrated with ChatGPT. We actually had one of those in our campus, which when it was purchased, it was $500,000. There aren't many schools that have the ability to have that, but we had one on campus. So, those are some of the things that were superly, I think we're really super innovative, but also I think pushing boundaries that most schools, either budget-wise or even innovation tolerance-wise, would have said we're out on.
Yeah, just didn't have the capacity to do that. So I'm curious to hear. So obviously in the U.S. you kind of have the K-12 system. Typically starting about 5 years old and then going through 18. Is it similar in Saudi Arabia? How do they approach it?
I will say one of the biggest surprises when I got there was that we actually started with infants, and so we started actually even as young as 2 to 3 weeks of age. With parents there able to come for part of the day on campus. But so we started with littles because we were supporting the employees and the people that worked at NEOM. So we had to have basically care for them. So we went. I'd never gone below 3 years of age in any of my schools I worked at. So that was a brand new thing. But then we went all the way through. Well, right now, this year will be the 11th grade year. Next year will be the final year for the 12th grade moving through. But yeah, honestly, it was very familiar in that way. Maybe because that was familiar for us and how we set that up. Certainly, again, we were doing two things though. We were building a school of necessity, as I often called it, building a school that had to support the people that worked in NEOM Community 1, and we were designing what would become the NEOM Baccalaureate, which is the way that we would structure the framework and kind of the learning style into the future. Those weren't the same things though, but in NEOM now, it was American English is the language of instruction, and much of what you would think of as how the school functioned and looked were similar in those ways. Our schedules though were very different. I think you know about me that I believe time is the forgotten thing in schools, that we've spent some time in the recent decade talking about space, and thank God we're finally doing that. But no one's still, I think, thinking about time as this great lost thing. We keep blocking things in 45-minute segments and thinking that that's how we can teach or learn or get things done. And so we blew that up. We'd already done that at All Saints, but we really blew it up at NEOM, where we had a very dynamic schedule that allowed kids the flexibility to really dive into some authentic learning, but also have the agency to make some choices within their day, but yet still have enough structure that we could guarantee we were delivering on the things that our parents expected us to deliver on.
So was it grouped by ages then? Like, I'm curious on the groupings. Was that similar, where you had kind of grades, classrooms?
So yes, it is at NEOM now. Now I will say, and I'm not there, but our plan for NEOM Baccalaureate would be that it would be less structured in that way, though, that it really would be more competency based, and that really age would be a very small factor, and certainly wouldn't be a limiting factor in where and what you were studying. And we think about down the road in the line that you might very well have somebody who has right time learning, and they could be 35 years old but sitting in a class with a 12-year-old because there's something they needed to learn. They could come in and opt in for that part of what's going on, and they really have a more dynamic feel. But in the NEOM Community School, though, it was much more structured. Now, again, for various reasons. One, we were doing this. We were building a plane while we were flying it, remember, because we grew fast. But also, we were having people come into NEOM from all over the world, and we really need to create a system that people can understand. Some of the people are only there for a year or 2 years, and their children are moving on. So to create what would be really this stop for them that was so unique that then they wouldn't be able to transition back to school, certainly wouldn't be good for the family, the child, or for NEOM. So we had to create a system that had some of those trappings so that it was transferable as they came in and left.
That makes sense. And hearing that it was primarily for the employees, so it probably felt more like an international school in a lot of ways.
Well, I do think that's true, but I will say that it's like no other international school in the world because we had over 100 nationalities represented. You know, most international schools, when you go there, it's one nationality in another country that is largely then following that trend, and they have a few other groups that join in, right? But it's usually not as international as you might think. But NEOM truly was this incredible place where, again, we had 100 nationalities represented in my school, and my goal was to try to learn as many of those languages that I could and say hello every morning to the kids, and they got a kick out of it because I'm not a linguist anyway. But it was just so fun to me to watch, though, these dynamic students that had experienced so much already in life, but also that blending what was happening in the classroom. We truly were this place where our students were, I think, living out what the future is going to look like.
So tell me a little bit more then, because it was built more for kind of the employees, like as they're coming in, is there intention that you're also trying to build a new standard of what it's like for the citizens of Saudi Arabia? Or is it more the intention of like, we are going to just continue to attract people from around the world, so we need to build this for people coming here?
Yeah. Again, two things we were doing. We were trying to make sure that the NEOM Community School was a great place for the full-time employees of NEOM that wanted the very best for their students. I mean, these, again, are the highest flyers in the world. They have high expectations for their kids and what they want to experience at school. So we had to build that. But then we were creating the NEOM Baccalaureate, which will be, again, what is used hopefully not only just through all the NEOM Giga projects, but we imagined when I was there, I keep saying we, I gotta shift that, but that would become a standard for the world, though, and that we do imagine that could become something that in any country in the world, you could say that I want a NEOM school here, and that we'd be able to help them with that. You could either take the framework, you could take the framework curriculum, you could take the whole thing. We know how to build the buildings really fast and beautifully as well. So that's really the vision of it, but that's why I always say that we really were doing two things, which made it a really unique challenge for me as well, right? We were serving current families with a very unique subset of needs, people from all over the world, But then we were also building something that would be serving the citizens of Saudi Arabia and all those people that choose to live in the Line or at Oxagon or Trojena, what that would look like in a futuristic city down the road too. And it really was a great lesson for me. I've always considered myself an innovator, and I've thought about how you move from one place to the other. But this was a unique challenge to think about how you can live in two places at one time, actually, that could eventually bridge too. We wanted them to bridge, but they right now did not bridge, but we were living in two places.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I know your mind talking about space and time of like reimagining that. Can you talk a little bit about like what did the spaces look like there? And then, and if it ties into what the time and what the scheduling looked like, feel free to kind of wrap that in there. But would we recognize it as kind of like a typical school if somebody walked in?
Yeah, I think you would definitely recognize it as a school, but I think it would be like, I've said many times that if we had our main campus that we finished in January of 2023 is when we opened that building. If that was anywhere in the United States, it would be one of the top schools in the country as far as how we use in space and certainly the beauty of it as well. We really tried to follow most of the principles that I learned with and from you, thinking about how a space should be that third teacher, that really it should really be contributing always to the goals and the outcomes of the learners in the space. And it is an active participant. So we built around the idea of, first of all, agility and the room being flexible. We certainly built around the idea of bringing in natural light and having the ability for us to go beyond the walls and halls is the phrase that we used a lot. And that was not only just a figurative thing. We wanted our teachers to move metaphorically past all of these things that brought them in, but also we wanted the room to feel like it was going outside and inside was coming in at all points. So we had beautiful ways that we did that through our hydroponic towers and gardens and things like that. But we also really focused in on how we could use vertical and horizontal spaces throughout the building so that a wall doesn't have to be a wall. It can be so many more things. It could be an active display for putting up student work. It could be a directional. It could be glass. It could be a writing surface. And so, every horizontal and vertical surface had a thought that went around like, is that just a whatever, or is it something else, or is it multiple things? So I'm really proud of the spaces, and I think that even more so, I'm proud of what we learned as we iterated, which I believe is so much part of the good design process, and that what's going to come down the road is going to be even more incredible, not only because of the lessons learned, but because of the technologies that are coming forward right now that are making it even more possible to some of the things we dreamed about, we couldn't quite figure out, but now they're actually very feasible now with some of the things that are emerging right now.
Very cool. Yeah. And then the scheduling, how do you do that? I'm just fascinated because you're right. Like you're part of this big organization, big corporation, and then you're taking people from all over the world that have their own perceptions of what school looks like. What was the scheduling and what did that look like compared to what we're used to here in the States?
Yeah. So, some of the unique challenge for us is that we were supporting the corporation by making sure we had, again, the best education, but also that these people could work the hours that NEOM demanded. And so we had to make sure that basically from about 7 to about 5:45 every day that we had great things going on. That's a longer day than most schools are responsible for. Even though they may have extended care, most schools don't have that kind of day. So in one way, it was a big challenge for us to build programs for that long without just spending everybody out, which I think we did most of the time, but not probably every day. But then also thinking that was a benefit because now we could really chop that day up differently, and we could do some things that maybe you wouldn't do in a normal school. So like a lot of things that used to be in what you would consider extended care activities at most schools, we were able to build into the day. So it became a core part, which was important to me because, again, in my experience that I've seen that at a lot of our schools in the United States, we have a lot of these extra programs. And if you're child is able to participate, or you have the means to make it happen, time, money, or whatever wise, then they can have this really incredibly rich experience. But if some students can't have that, then they don't have the same experience. So you do have some have and have nots in some campuses because of how that's structured. But we were able to take that away. So all of our students were able to have this same experience and be able to have these really high enriching activities because we could then break the time out. But we also, like I say, we were able to build it so that we could more personalize their day. So we had certain times within the day where students had lots more choice about what they were doing and then hopefully why they were doing it. And then we had the ability to make blocks for bigger projects so that they had sustained time, big block days, and then we had small block times, so that there are certain things in learning that you just need a quick iteration. I don't need 45 minutes to just review this one thing, but unfortunately too many schools still do that. And I would always this is where most parents challenged, because this was so different than what they saw when they were going to school. And I would just always challenge them that, do you work that way now? I mean, unless you work in a factory, you probably don't work in these very scheduled blocks of time, because you're doing different things. And if I told you that you had one certain task, but you had to do it in 45 minutes, whether it was a small task or a big task, you'd push back on me immediately and you'd be like, I don't need that much time, or I'm going to need more time. And I said, that's how our students feel, I think, in many of our traditional schools all day long. They feel like, you're not giving me the time to do this right, or you're wasting my time by giving me too much. And so we really thought through how we could use that as again, what I kind of consider the fourth teacher now, because time is this thing that is there for us, and it's either fighting you all along the way, saying, hurry, 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 when you don't want them to, or you're saying, we got way too much time, this doesn't matter, just blow it off. And so if you have that right, though, you see kids that are engaged. You build enough time where they can really go in deep and have deeper learning, but not too much time where they can have urgency still, that we got to get to work here. This is important.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a book idea in there, fourth teacher.
Somewhere.
So, all right. So as we're getting close to wrapping up here time-wise, I want to hear what were the those moments that are like, oh man, like either like you thought it would work this way or work differently, that you were like, oh, I wish I could apply that to previous ones or moving forward to schools that you're working with here. Like, what were those things that you saw? You're like, oh man, like I actually get to see it now, and I can view it differently than what I thought in theory.
Yeah, I love that question. I think that there's so much of it that has just stretched my thinking that it's hard for me to probably give you a specific answer, but I'll try. I mean, I'll say the first thing for me, though, is I've learned that there's still a high value, though, in trying to really dream big and having these audacious goals. And you will fall short, and you won't always get to exactly where you're planning. But if you have a team that is really dedicated around it, and you're really staying mission focused, well, what is your point? Why are you stretching right now? Then you're going to end up in some pretty cool places. And we certainly did that. There were many things that we started and we got down the road and we realized that, well, that's not working, and we chucked it, if you will. But we didn't just lose that. We learned great lessons there that then spiraled into the other things that we were working on. And then lastly, I would say that the one thing that I really took away from my work at the NEOM Community Schools is that relationships are still the most important thing, and that I love innovation. I love the idea of how we can use emerging technologies to make us better and more efficient. But at the end of the day, it is that time that we have. And that's why I'm so bullish on AI, is because I believe that AI is that one possible game changer in schools that can give the one thing that we need more, and that's time. We need time for those relationships. You can't rush a great relationship. And so if we can find ways to free teachers up, then we can give them more time for that one really important place for success, and that is building relationships, having time together. I've often said that if you go into any school in the country and you ask teachers why they're not doing more or why they can't quite get where they want to get, almost universally their answer is going to be time. They may say it in different ways, but really it's about, I'm running out of time. I can't do everything the school's asking. And again, it may be priorities at the school. Maybe they're asking too much in certain areas, but it still comes down to time. And so if AI can start freeing us up in some of those ways and allow teachers to have more relationships and then have all those things that supporting that time through, again, maybe robotics and having AI generate more information through biometric feedback, et cetera, I mean, that's a really, really cool place that I hope that I get to be down the road.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, because I've been so curious the second I heard you were making that move, and now that you're back. So thanks for sharing that. It's always good to.
It's my pleasure. I really, one of the things that my wife and I are dedicated to is to making sure that we continually tell the story about how amazing Saudi Arabia was, though, to us and to our family. That it was, we thought it would be an adventure for us just to experience, but it truly has changed our lives. The people of Saudi Arabia are the most generous and hospitable people you'll ever meet in your life. They are motivated right now to do something really incredible, and they want to be a part of our global community. And so we just always want to share that if anyone gets a chance to go to Saudi Arabia or to work in these projects, it's a worthy enterprise, and they're amazing people, and we loved our experience.
Great to hear. Awesome. Well, to the listener, if you have not hit subscribe, hit it wherever you're listening from. BetterLearningPodcast.com is the hub, and that's where we're getting a lot of our ideas, guests, people who feel like there's a topic that they want to hear about or a guest that they would like to hear on the show. We get a lot of ideas. We review it in our planning meetings all the time. So go ahead and put that information in there. Mike, I just love spending time with you. I wish we had more time. I need to find I'm coming to North Carolina sometime soon then to come see you.
Please, you're welcome anytime. Come visit and we will have fun. I can't wait to reconnect more.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, welcome back. The views and opinions expressed on the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and my guests, and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.